What if I told you that the person you are currently obsessed with doesn't actually exist? We've all felt it, the late night scrolling, the heart-stopping notifications, and the constant mental movies. But today, we are going beyond the butterflies. We are performing surgery on your subconscious to under 6 stages of a crush. This isn't just about romance. It's about why your brain treats a stranger like a life-saving drug and how you can stop losing yourself in the process. By the end of this video, you won't just understand them. You will finally understand yourself. Welcome to the architect's journey. Have you ever stopped to wonder why your brain treats a person you barely know like a life-saving drug? It's one of the greatest paradoxes of the human experience. How someone who was a complete stranger just minutes ago can suddenly feel like the missing piece of your soul, triggering a physiological response so intense it rivals the most powerful substances on Earth. We've all been there, that sudden electric jolt when your eyes meet across a crowded room, or that strange magnetic pull toward a person you've only just met. This is what I call the biological hijack, a moment where your ancient survival instincts override your modern logic. Within the first 3 seconds of seeing someone, your brain has already conducted a complex chemical audit, scanning for patterns of familiarity and safety, often confusing intensity for intimacy. You feel those famous butterflies in your stomach. But have you ever considered what they actually are? In the world of modern psychology, that fluttering sensation is the gut-brain axis in full revolt. It's not just romance. It's actually your body's fight or flight response. Your heart rate climbs, your palms sweat, and your pupils dilate because your system is preparing for a monumental shift. You aren't just meeting a person, you are meeting a possibility. This is where you become the architect. Before you even know their favorite color or their deepest fears, you begin sketching a blueprint of a future with them. You start building a magnificent skyscraper of expectations in your mind, floor by floor, based on nothing more than a smile or a shared glance. We mistake this rush of dopamine for the arrival of love, but in reality, it is the birth of an illusion. We are often more in love with the version of the person we've created in our heads than the human being standing right in front of us. We are projecting our own unhealed needs onto a blank canvas, hoping they will be the masterpiece we've been waiting for. But remember, a building is only as strong as the ground it sits on, and right now, you are building on the shifting sands of chemistry. Stop and ask yourself, are you falling for the person, or are you falling for the feeling of being wanted? Don't let the temporary high of a new connection blind you to the permanent truth of your own worth. Once the biological hijack takes hold, we enter the first formal stage of the architect's journey, the blueprint. Have you ever asked yourself why, out of the billions of people on this planet, your heart chose to stop for this specific person? It feels like destiny, but modern psychology suggests something far more profound is at play, known as Imago theory. This theory posits that your subconscious mind carries a hidden blueprint of love, constructed from your earliest memories, your childhood wounds, and the familiar patterns of those who first cared for you. When you experience that sudden spark, it's not always a sign of a soulmate. Often, it's simply your brain recognizing a familiar pattern. You aren't seeing a person. You are seeing a possibility that fits your internal map. This is where the architect within you begins to draw. You take a single data point, the way they laugh, the specific cadence of their voice, or even a shared interest in a book, and you use it to sketch out an entire personality. In ancient philosophy, we distinguish between kama, the fire of desire and sensory attraction, and ananda, a state of deep, soul-centered bliss. The blueprint stage is heavy on karma. It is flickering, hot, and consuming. It's an excitement that feels like life, but it lacks the stability of true presence. You are essentially falling in love with a sketch of your own making, not the reality of the human being in front of you. To navigate this stage without losing your center, you must practice what I call the observation breath. When that rush of recognition hits you, don't run with it. Stop. Inhale the excitement, but exhale the expectation. Observe the spark like a scientist watching a reaction in a lab. Acknowledge the chemistry without letting it dictate your history. If you don't learn to separate the person from the pattern, you will spend your life chasing blueprints and wondering why the buildings keep falling down. The goal isn't to stop the spark, but to ensure you aren't using a temporary flame to light a path that leads nowhere. Before you lay the first brick of your heart, you must ask yourself, am I seeking a connection with a real human soul, or am I just trying to find someone to fit into a mold I created years ago? True intimacy begins not when we find the person who fits our blueprint, but when we are brave enough to tear the blueprint up and see the person for who they actually are. Why is it that you can spend 40 minutes scrolling through the social media profile of someone you've barely spoken to, feeling a rush of adrenaline with every photo, every caption, and every like? This is stage 2, the limerence loop, a psychological state of involuntary obsession where your thoughts are no longer your own. They have been hijacked. As the architect, you are no longer just looking at a blueprint. You have begun building the skyscraper. You are constructing entire floors of what-ifs and could bears. You're imagining the conversations you haven't had and the future memories you haven't made. In the world of modern neuroscience, your brain's reward system is firing like a slot machine. Every time you check your phone to see if they viewed your story or replied to a message, you are seeking a hit of dopamine that rivals the most addictive substances on earth. But here is the profound danger. You are feeding an addiction to a fantasy, not a connection with a person. We often confuse this mental noise for the intensity of love, but ancient wisdom reminds us that true peace is found in the present, not in the frantic construction of a future that doesn't exist yet. When you are in the limerence loop, you are living in the not yet. And in doing so, you are abandoning the ground you actually stand on. You become a prisoner to a notification, losing your sovereignty to a screen. To break this cycle, you must implement the 24-hour rule. When you feel that anxious, frantic urge to double text because they haven't replied, or that pull to spiral into their digital past, stop. Wait 24 hours. This isn't a game of playing hard to get. It is an act of reclaiming your power. It is about proving to yourself that your emotional stability is not dependent on someone else's response time. By slowing down the construction of your mental skyscraper, you allow the dust of obsession to settle, so you can see the reality of the situation. You cannot build a lasting life with someone if you are too busy worshipping the image of them you've created in your mind. Remember, mastery of your heart begins with the mastery of your attention. If you cannot control where your mind wanders, you will never be the master of where your life goes. Have you ever noticed how, when you're deep in a crush, the other person seems to lose their humanity and become something closer to a deity? This is stage 3, the pedestal trap. In psychology, we call this the halo effect, a cognitive bias where we take one or two positive traits we've observed and use them to paint a picture of total perfection. Because they are charming, we assume they are kind. Because they are confident, we assume they are stable. As the architect of this connection, you are no longer just building a skyscraper, you are plating it in 24-karat gold before you've even checked the foundation. But here is the silent cost. The higher you build that pedestal, the smaller you feel standing at the base of it. This stage is physically taxing. Your body is flooded with cortisol, the stress hormone, because the stakes have become impossibly high. When you turn a human being into a god, every text message becomes a divine sign, and every silence feels like a religious abandonment. You find yourself losing sleep, replaying moments, and polishing an image that doesn't actually exist. This is the idolatry of the heart, and it is the enemy of true intimacy. To break this spell, you must perform what I call the humanizing exercise. I want you to intentionally strip away the gold leaf. Imagine this person in the most mundane, unglamorous moments of human life. Imagine them stuck in a long line at the post office, or struggling with a sneeze that won't come, or waking up with messy hair and a bad cold. This isn't about disrespecting them. It's about rescuing them from the burden of your perfection. You cannot truly love someone until you allow them to be flawed. Ancient wisdom teaches us that we only find peace when we stop seeking it in the shadows of others and start cultivating it within ourselves. The person you've put on that pedestal is just as messy, as confused, and as human as you are. Stop looking up at them and start looking across at them, because you cannot have a real relationship with a statue. You can only have one with a person. Reclaim your own power by realizing that the light you see in them is actually a reflection of the light you are willing to project. If you don't take them off the pedestal, you will never be close enough to actually reach their hand. Why does the very thing that once made you feel alive suddenly start to make you feel inadequate? This is stage 4, the shadow in the mirror. The moment the excitement of the crush transitions into the anxiety of vulnerability. As the architect of this emotion, you've built your skyscraper high, but now you're standing on the top floor, looking down, realizing for the first time how much it would hurt to fall. In modern psychology, we understand that a crush acts as a high-definition mirror, reflecting back not just who you are, but everything you feel you lack. This is what Carl Jung called the shadow self. If you are drawn to their confidence, it's often because you are ignoring your own power. If you are attracted to their sense of adventure, it's likely because you've allowed your own life to become stagnant. The person hasn't changed, but your relationship to yourself has. You start playing the texting games, overanalyzing every punctuation mark and delay, because you shifted from a state of curiosity to a state of survival. You are no longer asking if they are right for you. You are desperately wondering if you are enough for them. This is the paradox of vulnerability. We want to be seen, yet we are terrified of being known. To navigate this stage, you must perform a radical internal pivot. Stop asking, will they choose me? And start asking, who am I becoming in their presence? If you find yourself becoming anxious, small, or dishonest just to fit their perceived blueprint, then you aren't building a relationship. You are building a prison. Ancient mindfulness teaches us that our worth is an inherent quality, not a trophy to be won through the approval of another. Use this stage as a diagnostic tool for your own healing. If their silence makes you feel worthless, that worthlessness was already there, waiting to be healed. The crush simply brought it to the surface. True confidence isn't the belief that they will like you. It's the realization that you will be completely fine if they don't. Stop looking for a person to complete your puzzle and start realizing that you are the artist. Your value is not a variable that changes based on someone else's interest. So stop giving away the keys to your kingdom before you've even seen their foundation. What happens when the person you thought was perfect finally does something that deeply annoys you, or worse, reveals a side of themselves that doesn't fit your beautiful blueprint? This is stage 5, the earthquake, the moment of demasking, where the fantasy skyscraper you've been building in your mind begins to shake under the weight of reality. For weeks or months, you've been living in an architectural dream, but now the death of the projection has arrived. In modern psychology, this is the transition from passionate intensity to cognitive evaluation. It's the point where your brain stops being fueled by dopamine and starts demanding truth. You finally see the cracks in the foundation. Maybe it's a character flaw you ignored, a difference in core values, or simply the realization that they are a human being with bad moods and messy habits. Most people panic at this stage. They think because the rush is fading, the love is dying. But I want you to understand something profound. You aren't falling out of love. You are finally meeting the real person. You cannot love someone you haven't seen clearly, and you haven't seen them clearly until the earthquake has stripped away your expectations. Ancient mindfulness teaches us the beauty of kintsugi, the art of repairing broken pottery with gold, making it stronger and more beautiful for having been broken. This stage asks you to practice radical acceptance of the cracks in the human being standing before you. Are you willing to trade the perfect image for the imperfect reality? The earthquake is not meant to destroy your connection. It is meant to test if the foundation is made of sand or stone. As an architect, you have to decide if you are going to walk away because the dream shifted, or if you are going to roll up your sleeves and start building something real. This is the most critical juncture of any relationship because it is where the crush dies so that a partnership can be born. Remember, a fantasy is easy to maintain, but it's also hollow. A real connection requires the courage to look at the flaws and say, I see you and I'm still here. Don't run from the earthquake. Use the tremors to find out what is truly unshakable in your heart. Now that the dust has settled and the earthquake of reality has finished its work, you stand at the final and most difficult stage of the journey. Stage 6, the foundation. You are standing at a crossroads where the fantasy has fully dissolved, and you are left with a choice that will define your emotional maturity. Do you attempt to build a permanent structure on the ground that remains, or do you have the courage to walk away from the site entirely? This is where many of us fall into the sunk cost fallacy, a psychological trap where we believe that because we've invested months of longing, hours of digital stalking, and a significant portion of our emotional energy, we must make it work. We feel that letting go would mean we've lost that time. But as an architect of your own life, you must look at the soil, not the skyscraper you dreamed of. Is there a shared vision here? Is there mutual respect, consistent effort, and a foundation of truth? If the person you've been crushing on doesn't possess the character to match the chemistry, then you aren't quitting. You are practicing the ancient wisdom of Vairagya, or non-attachment. This doesn't mean you stop caring. It means you have the clarity to see that you cannot build a home in someone who isn't ready to be a shelter. Transformation occurs when you realize that the purpose of the crush wasn't necessarily to lead to a wedding, but to lead you back to yourself. Sometimes the foundation you were meant to build wasn't a relationship with them, but a stronger, more resilient relationship with you. If the reality doesn't match the blueprint, you must be brave enough to pack up your tools and move on with gratitude for the lessons learned. Growth is rarely found in forcing a connection that doesn't fit, but in the wisdom to know when a season has served its purpose. Do not let the fear of being alone convince you to settle for a foundation that is already cracking. Your heart is too valuable to be invested in a project that requires you to compromise your peace. So choose to build only where the ground is as solid as your worth. As we reach the end of this journey, we arrive at the ultimate provocation, the truth that sits at the very heart of why we experience these intense attractions in the first place. I want you to look back at the skyscraper you built, the earthquakes you endured, and the foundations you tested, and ask yourself one final uncomfortable question. What was this person providing for you that you weren't providing for yourself? This is the final stage of the architect's journey, turning the mirror away from them and back toward your own soul. In modern psychology, we recognize that a crush is often a form of displaced growth. If you are drawn to their boldness, it's because you've been silencing your own voice. If you are captivated by their sense of peace, it's because you've allowed your own life to become a storm of chaos. You weren't just falling for a person, you were falling for a dormant version of yourself that they happen to represent. Ancient wisdom teaches us that we are already whole, yet we spend our lives trying to find completion in the external world, moving from one blueprint to the next, hoping the next person will finally make the structure stand. But true sovereignty is the realization that crush energy is actually self-evolution energy in disguise. It is a signal from your subconscious telling you exactly where you need to heal, where you need to expand, and where you need to love yourself more deeply. Don't waste the intensity of this experience by merely mourning a fantasy or chasing a ghost. Take that fire, that dopamine, that drive, and redirect it into building the life you were trying to find in them. Become the adventurer you admired, cultivate the confidence you envied, nurture the peace you sought. When you become the source of your own validation, you stop being a beggar for someone else's attention and start being the master of your own presence. The architect's greatest masterpiece is never a relationship with another. It is the unshakable sanctuary they build within themselves. You are not a half looking for another half. You are a whole being learning to share your abundance. Stop searching for someone to complete your story and start realizing that you are the one holding the pen. Your worth is not a question to be answered by someone else's interest, but a truth to be lived by your own design.